Hey everyone, it's great to be back with you all again. While Treasure was rarely known for creating sequels to their various games, it did happen a couple of times, and here's one example. Coming in 12 years after the original, this Game Boy Advance sequel would take place after the original, and feature a new story with numerous changes to the gameplay. Did lightning manage to strike twice? Strap in, and we'll see just how well Gunstar Heroes for the Game Boy Advance holds up today! Developed by Treasure, published by Sega, and released in October of 2005 for the Game Boy Advance, Gunstar Super Heroes, also known as Gunstar Future Heroes in Europe, is a run-and-gun sequel to the original Gunstar Heroes from 1993, with multiple similarities and differences in both the story and gameplay. The game takes place multiple years after the events of the first. After defeating Gold and Silver in the original Gunstar Heroes, his body explodes and turns into 4 separate moons orbiting the Earth. The reveal of a surprise 5th moon opens up a plot involving the evil group Empire and their plan to resurrect Gold and Silver once again. Just like in the original, you're given the choice to play between 2 different characters, once again named Red and Blue. But these are not the same characters as the original game. Red, for example, is actually a young girl this time around. Their gameplay styles are also slightly different, with Red using the standard Energy Blast weapon, and Blue using a Lightning-style weapon with better range and less power. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about the gameplay basics first. Just like in the original game, your character moves left and right on a 2-dimensional plane, with the ability to shoot in multiple directions. You also have the ability to melee strike, jump kick, and even wall kick, with the latter being a new addition to the game. Unlike the original, there are some fundamental gameplay changes that will really make this feel like a somewhat different experience. For starters, instead of picking up and switching between various power-ups to mix and match your ammunition type, you're instead given a choice of 3 types from the get-go, with the ability to switch between them at will. On one hand, this allows you to switch to your favorite ammunition types throughout each stage, but on the other, it takes away the customization factor, and the numerous combination types that made the original game feel so unique. I don't believe either method is bad, even though I strongly preferred the setup in the original game. This will of course come down to preference. Red and Blue themselves control similarly, but have slight differences in terms of the weapons they come equipped with. There are also plenty of differences in the way each character's story plays out, even though the level design is the same, and they hit all of the same major plot points. The game also sets you up with the free shot, that's the shooting while you move setup, and lets you change it to fixed shot by holding down the R button. Just like in the original, the action comes at you fast and frantically, with enemies of all types crowding up your screen. And of course, it simply wouldn't be Gunstar Heroes without a myriad of boss and mini-boss battles to occupy your time. In this sense, the game is very much faithful to the original, and will no doubt please veterans of the original. Not everything is quite the same, however. One major change is the way the story is presented. Instead of things simply playing out as you visit each stage, you're actually presented with multiple cutscenes throughout these chapters, with decent amounts of dialogue to go around. What's discussed in these will vary depending on which character you chose, and more importantly, what difficulty you're playing on. Even the game's endings will vary, depending on the difficulty, with easy mode having the worst ending, and hard mode containing the best ending. While some may see this as an encouragement to try out every difficulty, you could also argue that it's essentially locking the game's good ending behind the hardest difficulty, which is understandably going to disappoint many out there. But how is the game itself? Is it fun enough to play through that many times to get all the dialogue options and endings? I personally think so, yes, but there is a lot to talk about first. On its most basic level, just like the original, this is another short but fun and fast-paced title, with amazing visuals and action coming at you in every direction, including a multitude of mini-boss and boss encounters to change things up. I don't think many would disagree about that. So what could go wrong? Well, if you have played the original, you, like me, may not find the changes made to the gameplay to be very good ones. With no possible way to change the weapon layout or combine with other weapons, you lose a bit of the fun that came with seeing what power-ups might appear throughout each stage. Now the only thing you can pick up is health boosts. But it's not all bad. The additions to the melee combat help increase your ability to change up attack styles, and the ability to switch between free and fixed shot on the fly is actually very nice. I also don't mind the super shot, as it did feel pretty satisfying to use, especially on bosses. Overall, I'd say I'm a bit torn on this gameplay setup. I don't like it nearly as much as the one in the original title, but it still works and carries you through the game just fine. Fans of the original will also notice something a little odd. If you search around online long enough, you may notice that some fans are saying that they feel this title should be labeled as more of a remake or reimagining of the original, rather than a full-fledged sequel. Why is that? Well, for starters, entire stages and bosses in this title are exactly the same as they were in the Genesis title, even down to the look and attack patterns. I had to do a double take once or twice, just because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The fight with Green, one of the most iconic boss fights of the original game, felt like more of the same, despite the slight difference in the way you move around on your cart and the super meter. The parts that are unique to the sequel are also quite interesting to talk about. One scenario involves your character on top of a ship being piloted by Yellow, having you spin it to dodge attacks and aim your own. Moments like this were more of what I was hoping for. Some of the more unique boss fights in the game were really a joy to play as well. The game also makes multiple references to other Sega properties. One of them was a sequence referencing Flicky, where you're tasked with collecting a bunch of small birds and getting them back to the exit without being attacked. While kind of funny, I found it a bit of a slog to play through due to the wonky camera. There's also a top-down vertical shooter stage, just as we previously got a horizontal shooter stage in the first game. While I don't mind the idea of this part, it felt surprisingly frustrating with little room for movement. It's also sure to stop quite a few people in their tracks, which is a shame, as I felt like the shooter stage in the first game left enough leeway for a more casual shooter fan to get through it. I will say that most of the boss fights that were unique to this game were still very good to me, and I wish we had more of them. Another section that needs bringing up is this game's updated version of the board game or dice roll stage. The segments in this part of the game range from serious to downright wacky. I saw this as a plus, as the sillier moments reminded me of yet another thing that made the original game so much fun: the over-the-top and funnier parts. While I did find myself getting a little more frustrated with this section in the sequel, mostly due to a large amount of spaces to clear and a lack of places to heal without careful planning, this was still a testament to what made these games so fondly remembered, and I'll gladly take it over not. Funny enough, I think it's safe to say that people who will enjoy this title the most are going to be the ones who did not play the original before coming to this one. On its own, the title is still a lot of fun, with amazing action set pieces, creative boss encounters, wacky antics, and some of the best graphics the GBA had ever seen, alongside titles like Metroid Fusion, Astro Boy Omega Factor, etc. But I can't help feeling like there was a ton of wasted potential here. The lack of co-op, lack of weapon combinations, and lack of actual new content due to the rehashing of old stages and bosses really hurt. It turned what could have been a nearly perfect game into a merely good to great one instead. Don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed this title a lot and believe it to be somewhere in my personal top 10 GBA games, but I also feel like the issues I described are legitimate and could have been addressed better. I still love you though, Treasure. While it had a few fundamental gameplay differences that made it come up short as far as the original was concerned, I still enjoyed the game a lot, and found it to be a great time whether you played the original or not. The gameplay change-ups were still very interesting and worth experimenting with, and of course the personality that made the first game so enjoyable was absolutely still here. If it's short, wacky fun that you're aiming for, then look no further. Even on its lesser days, you really can't go wrong with Treasure. And that's going to do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Have you played this game before yourself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're feeling generous, please consider supporting my Patreon, where awesome people like Erica, Brandon, Cielo, and Jedi Dude all help to keep this channel going. Until next time, my friends,